Okay, good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our July webinar in our Network Leadership webinar series, Lessons from the Field. I'm Danielle Varda. I am the founder and CEO of Visible Network Labs and an associate professor at the School of Public Affairs at the University of Colorado, Denver. And I'm joined here with Dr. Robin Mobbs, who is my co-director at the Center on Network Science. I'm going to formally introduce her in just a moment. We are the co-hosts of our webinar series, and we welcome everyone today. We're excited to have a really awesome topic where we can talk about how networks and network leadership is part of building food systems around the country and even around the world. Today, our speakers are a really awesome panel that you're going to meet in a minute. I'm not going to actually do our introductions on that. Robin's going to do that. And so we will shift to that in just a minute. But you are at the right place. We're talking about food systems and network leadership today. We know this is an area that a lot of people are really passionate about, food and food as medicine and food as ways to address health and other kinds of outcomes for people are things that we're talking a lot about today. And I'm excited that we have this opportunity to learn from such leaders in the field. So this is with me, Dr. Robin Mobbs, who's an amazing person. She is not only the co-director of the Center on Network Science, but also an assistant professor and the program director for our MPA program at the School of Public Affairs. She's very humble in her work, but quite amazing at her ability to bring people together and host conversations. Her specialty areas are in conflict and negotiation and areas in networks on how to bring people together around these kinds of diverse topics. So really exciting to have Robin lead the webinar today and the discussion. So you'll hear from her in just a minute. I do like to introduce our organizations just to give us all a little plug. Visible Network Labs is a place where we aspire to make invisible networks visible. We're a social enterprise with a mission to help leverage network science to strengthen supportive connections and the outcomes of our work. We do that by providing learnings like these trainings, workshops, or webinars. We provide technology-based data and mapping tools, and we hope we're providing opportunities for collaborative innovation by focusing on translating data to practice. We run the Partner platform, which is a data mapping tool that organizations across the world now are using to help think about how we bridge efforts across diverse sectors and leverage resources and things so that we can better, do things better than alone. We also run Partner Me, which is a person-centered network app, which is a social needs screener on a person's individual personal support network to identify those who are at risk of adverse social connectedness, and also figure out how to bring social connectedness resources and assets into our health and mental health plans for people. Actually, our upcoming webinar in this series will focus on Partner Me and some use cases and some different clinical and non-clinical settings. So keep on the listserv and you'll get another announcement about that. At the Center on Network Science, we're really focused on training and facilitation, really bringing good consultation as a service to people in networks. And so this is what you'll see, our Network Leadership Training Academy, which is an offering that we're doing this year again online. We've always done it in person until COVID, which is what you're seeing here are images of our Network Leadership Training Academy. We miss it, but we do love our virtual convenings where we think a lot of people get access to this kind of thing as well. So if you want to stay connected to all of these things and you haven't already, you can find us on all the social media sites. And that's one way to get a lot of announcements on this. Okay, so I'm going to end to transition over to Robin. I thought I would just end though with one thing that I found really inspiring as thinking about this webinar and preparing for today. I just finished a book called The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek. And I think some of you might have read it, but in it, he talks about having an infinite mindset is really a different way to have a solution mindset, rather than if we think about things as finite problems. And I'm not going to read this quote, but we will share the slides later, so you'll have the opportunity to read it then. But he does give the example of an infinite mindset from this botanist who I learned about, Nikolai Vavilov, so I hope I'm saying his name right, who was addressing the problem of food scarcity and starvation during the siege of Leningrad from 1941 to 1944. And Vavilov was best known for his seed, I just lost the word, seed collection, as is in the picture here, that he started to build up during that time. But what was really striking to me was Sinek's description of Vavilov's just cause, which he described as a mission for all humanity. And again, I won't read through this, but in summary, he talked about how basically the people on his team doing this work to build these seed collections was really an effort to imagine this live of future generations, and not just of how we feed one person at a time, but in a way in which we might save entire civilizations. And the reason I brought this up today is I was really struck by our speakers today, and our identification of them as network leaders. We had a quick conversation right before this that, being the work that they do might not be something that they think of as network science. There might not be even language about the science, or they might not have identified themselves as network leaders, but there really is a real science behind this, a real thinking about this connection to an infinite mindset. And I think that you'll find today this perspective that they have on food systems is one that they bring really from that infinite mindset, which really is a great description of what network leadership is all about. So I really loved this example, and I would encourage you to find more out about this kind of work and story. And with that, I'll just pass it over to Robin, who's going to kind of guide you through the rest of the webinar. So thanks so much for joining us today, and really looking forward to all the engagement and questions, which you can always put in the chat throughout the whole time we're together. So thanks.
Wonderful, thank you. Thanks, Danielle. Well, hello, everyone. We have close to 200 people registered to attend today's webinar, so welcome. And then we're also recording it for those who are unable to join. And so around the US and indeed the world, people and organizations traditionally involved in separate elements of the food system have really come together to tackle challenges related to health, environment, and economy as part of the food systems movement. And so while it was already a hub of collaborative innovation because of that, of course, COVID further accelerated the importance of network leadership skills and strategies for those working on issues like food security, nutrition, environmental justice, and really meeting the demands placed on social service providers like food banks and nonprofits and other food-related organizations. So we have an incredible group of coalition builders and network leaders focused on improving our food systems for an hour of rich discussion. And I'm so pleased to introduce our esteemed panel. So I will just share my screen so we can keep an eye on our amazing panel. First, just in the order that their images appear on the screen, we have Marissa Silverberg, is Food Systems and Policy Administrator for Jefferson County Public Health. And Marissa works on addressing barriers to food access in communities across the Denver metro region as part of the Regional Food and Communities Collaborative, and facilitates the Jeffco Food Policy Council, a diverse collaborative composed of local governments, nonprofit organizations, food and farm businesses, residents, and policymakers. And Erin Ulrich is an implementation director for Colorado Blueprint to End Hunger, which is a collaborative network of partners aimed at eliminating hunger in Colorado during the next 5 years. In this role, she convenes partners, coordinates policy work, implements collaborative projects across the state. And she brings 10 years of experience in public and private and nonprofit sectors, including Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, Outreach to Haiti, and Catholic Mission Medical Mission Board. And then we have Minerva Delgado, is Director of Coalitions and Advocacy with Alliance to End Hunger. And based in Washington, D.C., Minerva has 30 years of experience working to end hunger and poverty. As a policy analyst, an organizer, a program manager, she's held senior positions in government, civil rights, and anti-poverty organizations. Then we have Wendy Peters-Moschetti as Director of Strategic Initiatives for Nourish Colorado. And Wendy leads the development and implementation of Nourish Colorado's strategies related to food systems. And she's worked for 15 years to improve equitable access to healthy foods, working with local, state, and national public health and agriculture partners to advance farm to institution, forge deeper connections between food assistance programs and local agriculture, and directing more public and private resources to regional food systems. And we have Karen Spiller, the Thomas W. Haas Professor in Sustainable Food Systems at the University of New Hampshire. And Karen's primary responsibility there is to connect the community-engaged transdisciplinary work of Food Solutions New England, and in particular its racial equity work, to students, faculty, and staff at UNH. And then she's also steering committee member of Food Solutions New England Network, Massachusetts ambassador for its New England Food vision, and on the boards of multiple organizations, including Boston Food Forest Coalition and Sustainable Business Network of Massachusetts, among others. So with the incredible wealth of experience and passion in this Zoom room, we hope you'll leave with new ideas, perspectives, and inspiration to apply to your own work. So I'm so excited to jump in with our panelists. But before doing that, we wanted to share just one visual representation of a food system to sort of provide a grounding for those participants joining from other fields. And so this is just one of many, but at its basic, the food system as essentially everything associated with food production and food utilization. And so we have the food system, the supply system right at its center, from production, storage, and transport, and processing to retail and consumption. But then of course that food supply system's embedded in an enabling environment that really creates the conditions in which it functions. So it operates in and is influenced by social, political, cultural, technological, economic, and natural environments. And then thinking of outcomes, we have socioeconomic outcomes, which include things like incomes and living conditions of actors within the system. But then food security, a critical outcome, often defined as the combination of food utilization, food access, which can involve food affordability, allocation preferences, and then food availability. And then of course there's environmental outcomes of the food system. And so this is just one of many visualized representations of food systems, but you can see the interconnected nature of the drivers and outcomes and the interdependence among the actors and the elements, but it's still such a simplification, of course. And so panelists, can you help us further understand sort of these layers of complexities and perspectives by sharing more about your network's missions and the work that you do? Maybe Wendy, would you be able to kick off the discussion?
You bet. Sorry, I was looking around. Who's going to start? So just a quick overview of just our organization, correct? Right, you bet. So thanks so much for the introduction, the orientation, Robin. I am Wendy Peters-Moschetti with Nourish Colorado. And if you can know as much as you want, if you go to nourishcolorado.org, our website, very high level, as Robin sort of alluded to in the introduction, we do work to ensure that each and every Coloradan has equitable access to nourishing food through a resilient and sustainable food system. So that is sort of our North Star. And it is a North Star, I think, that we share with dozens of organizations across the state, which I think is really great. I'd love it if hundreds of organizations actually had the same mission. And sort of what we do, sort of how we define our unique contribution to that mission is that we do run initiatives across the state of Colorado, so programs primarily around schools and institutions, and also in a sort of group of work that we call healthy food incentives, such as a SNAP incentive or produce program with other federal food assistance like WIC or the Older Adult Meal Program. And then we consistently focus on increasing our work at the state and federal level to do policy advocacy to make sure that the programs and initiatives that we are running become sustainable and permanent. And we don't run them anymore, and they no longer need to be grant funded. So that's a little bit about us. Do you want me just to pass it? I'll pass it off to Marissa. Is that okay?
I feel like we were all trying to be considerate of one another, not speak first. Hi, everyone. Marissa Silverberg. I use she, her pronouns. I work with Jefferson County Public Health. It's to the west of Denver in Colorado, and work on a variety of food systems work. I think two of our bigger projects to highlight that are network focused are Food and Communities Initiative, which is a regional collaborative with Jefferson County Public Health, Denver Department of Public Health and Environment, and Tri-County Health Department. So that's kind of the whole Denver metro area for folks unfamiliar. And we work really locally within communities. We have focus area or neighborhood level engagement into communities to learn about assets and barriers around food environments. So just access to food, is it healthy, is it culturally relevant, is it affordable, things like that. And look at opportunities to fund community as well as create policies to address some of those challenges. In addition, I coordinate our Food Policy Council in the county, which is composed of different entities, for-profits, not-for-profits, government entities, funders, and we really aim to address policies locally, statewide, and federally, largely in partnership with many organizations in Colorado to really improve food and nutrition security in Jefferson County. And I can pass it to Minerva.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Danielle and Robin, for the invitation. Really appreciate you putting together this webinar. So I'm Minerva Delgado with the Alliance to End Hunger, and my title is Director of Coalitions and Advocacy. The Alliance to End Hunger is a formal network, but we have both formal and informal networks as part of the work that I do. So the Alliance is just that. It's an alliance of about 100 organizations that have come together under the mission to end hunger, both in the United States and around the world. And so we are a membership organization. And so we work with national nonprofits, international NGOs, faith networks, corporations, universities, and foundations. And so some of the groups that you'll recognize their names of are part of our network, such as Feeding America, such as Share a Strength, Meals on Wheels America, Bread for the World, Islamic Relief USA, Catholic Charities, and others, AARP Foundation, universities as well, so Auburn University, Tufts, Syracuse University. And so we are an alliance, and so the idea is everyone's coming together to work collaboratively around ending hunger, as well as to do advocacy around ending hunger. And where we kind of fit into the food system schema that Robin laid out is that we're really working on the food security end of that. And many times we see that food security is a result of societal inequities, be they racial or gender, as well as environmental. And so, I feel like we touch different parts of that food system, all with a lens towards trying to make sure that people are food secure.
So hello, everyone. Good morning, good morning. And thank you again. Thank you so much for this opportunity to be with you. I really am honored. And I am sitting in New Hampshire, indigenous lands of Abenaki and Pennacock and Wabanaki peoples. So I want to give honor and grace to them. I am Karen Spiller. I am the Thomas Haas Professor of Sustainable Food Systems at UNH, University of New Hampshire in Durham, New Hampshire. And this role that Robin shared in the beginning, I am almost a founding member of Food Solutions New England, I'll say that. And it's really important to understand that this relationship with UNH and Food Solutions New England is one of those, the backbone. UNH serves as a backbone organization, and then you're familiar with that, where that organization kind of convenes us. It brings us for collaboration, and it creates a space for this network to thrive, to solutionize, and to come together on the commitment to racial equity in our food system and transforming it to a system that feeds and serves us all. And so when we think about Food Solutions New England, we're envisioning a powerful food movement, one that is democratically transforming New England, and a way that, again, sustainable, just, and fair. And resilience is in that as well. And when we think about our mission, we are 6-state, New England, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Vermont, and Maine. Sometimes I gotta get them all in. And we're multiracial when we think about this. Regional, which is something different than many of us were thinking about when we think about our food systems. We're really thinking about what's right in front of us. But we understood that the power of transforming our food system together in this regional system, where we're coming together from different backgrounds, different knowledge base, different lived experiences, different cultures, all that diversity in our organizations, in our businesses, in our groups can come together and create, again, a food system that feeds and serves us all in a way that we could not do that in isolation. So it really has been very much a gift. I think all of us in this network feel that it's a gift to be able to be in community around our values of democratic empowerment, looking at the political power people have. We hold that. We look at the racial equity and dignity for all. Yes, we believe that racism must be undone for us to achieve the equitable food justice that we're talking about, that Minerva's talking about, food access, food quality, food justice, and sustainability, because we want this for the long term. So how do we make sure that what we're developing, the interconnectedness, really serves us for longevity, as well as trust? We find that is really core to any food system, any network that is looking to, again, for us, transform the food system so it can feed and serve us all, that we are doing this in community. We're doing this recognizing we each have our skills, our talents, our knowledge, and together, again, we're stronger, we're more powerful, and we are able to interconnectedly use that gift to be able to create something different. So that's a little bit about Food Solutions New England. And again, it's 6 states, and we're diverse in terms of the styles of work that we do. We're government, we're small nonprofits, we're fishermen, and we're farmers. We are dreamers, we are activists, we are all of that at the same time across the food system continuum. So I will pass it to Erin.
Awesome. Thank you, Karen. And I'm not sure I want to follow that actually, but I will. I'll do my best. Hi, everyone. I'm Erin Ulrich. Thanks so much for having me here. I'm honored to be with this amazing panel of people. I backbone the Colorado Blueprint to End Hunger. So we are the backbone for partners here in Colorado, aiming to end hunger over the course of 5 years. We are about 2 years into it. So the first 2 years were obviously not the best. And we saw hunger rates really triple in Colorado in the last year due to COVID. So we've got a lot bigger problem. We had a big problem to solve in the beginning, and now we have an even bigger problem to solve over the next few years. But we're focused on doing that through a number of different strategies. And I'll put our theory of change in the chat box just so I don't go on too long. But we have 5 core goals really looking at changing perceptions around the issue of hunger, really shifting from hunger being the result of an individual moral failure to hunger being the result of systemic failure, and how that needs to happen. We have a goal focused on community food access. We have 2 goals focused on community access, and really looking at both the retail side of food access as well as the charitable food system. And then we have a couple of goals focused on enrollment in federal nutrition programs. We're here in Colorado very under enrolled for our eligible populations, and so are leaving a lot of federal resources on the table that could be going in directly into the hands of families. And there's a whole lot of context and additional information that I can provide, but I'll put the theory of change in the chat. I will say just, one of our core principles is identifying a number, dozens of different ways where people are able to engage. So we have a governing council, we have different committees, including policy, state and federal policy, data and evaluation, where some people are working on indicators, some people are working more on story gathering. We have a community healing, action, and truth component of really lifting up recommendations from community members who are navigating the system. We have a funders collaborative. We have a number of different work groups and then project teams. So really trying to identify lots of different ways where people can engage in a way that feels most impactful to them. And that's really just been a core principle for us as we design the implementation structure.
Wonderful, thank you. And just building on a few things that I heard as you were all talking, which is just amazing, but the way that you're able to partner with so many different types of organizations and sort of develop that common understanding of issues and shared goals. And in fact, I noticed on the Alliance to Hunger website, right in the forefront, a shared conviction that addressing hunger is essential. And so, for example, Minerva, how have you and your colleagues at the Alliance been able to develop this shared understanding with your partners? What kind of challenges have you faced as you brought people together, with potential conflicting priorities and things like that around that shared understanding?
Thank you so much, Robin, for the question. So the Alliance to End Hunger, it's interesting because we do have our formal network. And I think with our formal network, it's a bit more straightforward. There's a statement of policy, which covers everything from, supporting the expansion of federal nutrition programs to, international development that's really people-centered, and there's 12 points there. So to be a part of the Alliance to End Hunger, there's an application and groups have to say, yes, we actually buy into this statement of policy. So there we have, at least we know coming in, there are some shared values around the things we all care about, want to advocate around. But we have 100 members formally. And so, and even though we're all there to end hunger, that means something different for each organization. Some organizations focus only on children, some just on babies and toddlers, others on seniors, and then others are focused not on any kind of life cycle span, but are looking at different sectors, charitable food, advocating on government and USDA resources. So it really does span a wide range. And so I think, trust is the first thing. And thank you, Karen, for mentioning that, because it is really how you get anything done in a large coalition. Because if we weren't a trusted partner and a trusted neutral partner, where, I remember my executive director, not that long ago said, I don't feel like we're, kind of out there enough. People don't know our name. And I was like, yeah, but they're not supposed to know our name. We are here to promote all of our partners. So yes, I hear you and we'll do more around that. But the point is, if we're not promoting our partners, they won't have trust in us. They'll think we're self-promoting. I said, so yes, I hear you, but it is a fine line. And so I'm here to make sure that our partners are working well together. And to do that, they have to see me as a trusted neutral party that will help resolve, small issues. We're promoting a policy and, maybe one group is like, oh, I'm not sure we can get behind that. Well, where is the challenge? Let's talk together. I'll pull those groups out and say, okay, let's have a conversation. Where can we find agreement? And if we can't find agreement, we're not moving forward, right? But I'm confident we can find it. Let's do it. So it's challenging in a really wonderful way, because once you get those groups working together, the strength of being able to say, we have national nonprofits, international NGOs, foundations, corporations, universities behind these policy proposals is very powerful for the advocacy. So there are challenges. Our biggest strength is our diversity, but it's also our biggest challenge. So it's one of those double-edged swords, and it's exciting work to be able to work with so many people who are so dedicated to ending hunger and really want to work together. And we just need to find the right path to make sure it happens. So I think with our informal network, it's not quite as straightforward. So for example, Erin's group, Colorado Blueprint to End Hunger, is part of our informal Hunger-Free Communities Network. They don't sign a policy statement. They're not paying dues, right? They're part of our informal network, and they generally have similar goals across communities. We're working in 33 states, but what we want to do is really hold up best practices and say, hey, Colorado Blueprint to End Hunger can be a blueprint in your state too. And so why don't we try to work together to make sure you understand what they're doing? Maybe that's something you want to do in your state. So that's a little more art than science, I would say, in terms of getting people on the same page about what does it mean to end hunger in our communities, what partners should we bring in, and how should we approach this? So I think hopefully that answers your question, but I think the trust is so important, and it does take time. It does take time. I think it's important to acknowledge it doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah, great, thank you. Right, and we've heard now from both Karen and Minerva about that importance of trust, and of course we know that from the research as well. Do any other panelists want to share how they were able to build trust among network partners? How to really build those sustainable, authentic relationships, but at the same time be able to budget your time, because of course that's an incredibly valuable resource, and how that balance between building the relationships and investing in them, but being human at the same time.
I'll just chime in. I mean, I think it's constant prioritizing, right? And being clear about which priorities you're choosing and why. I think that transparency around communication of, here's what we're doing and here's why we're doing it. And allowing, I think, we've had a lot of critique around kind of the initial goals of the blueprint and kind of how they were developed, and how they get implemented matters. And so really having those conversations about where we're strong and where we're not, and how we're hoping to improve. I think like we have to expose our own vulnerabilities to gain trust, to gain and build trust. And then I think Minerva's point around kind of being that neutral partner, it's hard. I have a lot of opinions, right? But that's not my job. My job is to build a process where everyone can share theirs and we can come to consensus and mutual agreements. And so I think just really showing up in the space, like how we show up as a backbone partner versus as an organizational partner is very, very different. And so I think just allowing for those conversations, and, we mess up every day. So I'm not claiming that we've got this down and we're solid. But I think, that kind of constant ongoing commitment to improvement, and then again, just sharing where we know we're falling behind, has been really important for us in terms of moving forward.
That's great, thanks. And as part of that communication about what the participants in the networks are able to undertake and accomplish as being a part of the network, I mean, is that part of what you're communicating to your network partners?
Yeah, I think, I would say for us, I don't know if that was specifically towards me. Sorry, it's so hard on Zoom. You can't see who people are looking at. But yeah, I mean, I think we're supposed to disappear in 3 years. So the blueprint getting credit for anything makes no sense, right? The blueprint developing infrastructure that needs to remain after 3 years of time makes no sense. So for us, it really is about how are we building up our partners and allowing these spaces for development so that we can disappear in 3 years. That's the ultimate goal. Whether that we will be fully in that place, debatable, right? But that's where we're working towards as a team. So I think a lot of that communication, yes, is around the successes of our partners and the competencies that they have and are able to bring to the table. And, you know, again, where there's places that the work can happen without us, we should fade into the background.
And I'd love to jump back in just on that question of what it takes, you know, to build the coalitions. Is there's also the give and take between organizations. So right now, our stated priority that we've negotiated and, you know, come to consensus on is child nutrition. But our senior nutrition groups are coming along with us because they know when it's time to talk about senior nutrition, that the entire coalition will be behind them. Right. And so they see the value of, you know, these are not our priorities at the moment. Of course, we care about them and we're willing to promote them. But, you know, organizations also have their own self-interest. And, you know, what they get out of it is when it's time for us to focus on senior nutrition, the entire coalition will be behind them. And so I think that that's part of the give and take in the coalitions. You have to make sure that each group is getting something out of it eventually, even if it's not today.
So Robin, I just want to add for Food Solutions New England, we're looking at building, building, building. So unlike Erin, they want to write themselves out of the job, but we're looking at building, building, building momentum and more people who see this network and the work that we're doing, the sharing, as Minerva's talking about, the intersectionality we have, the interconnectivity we have. We have different resources we can share, we can lend our power and privilege, and we can make pathways in a way that we wouldn't if we were in isolation. So we're always looking at join, be in this. And it's not membership. We're just like, come to a conference, come to a webinar, read the materials, come to the 21-day challenge. I'll talk more about that later, but it's open, an open invitation for you wherever you are to see yourself in this movement, in this network, and just contribute and just, we call it offers and we saw offers and takes, you know, so it's back. One of my friends always said, fair exchange is no robbery. So we're always giving and taking as we go. So I just wanted to just lift up that we want to grow, we want to deepen, we want to grow and deepen these relationships.
Wonderful, thank you. Well, and of course, you know, we've had quite a year and a half with the impact of the COVID pandemic. And so can you describe what changed for your organizations, your networks, communities during this past 16 months with the pandemic? Karen, you're still on my screen. Do you want to kick off that discussion? We'd love to hear from as many of you that would like to share and how that's kind of impacted the way that your network's working. I mean, can you stay in that building mode as you're responding to these changing needs?
I would have to say that for everyone, the beginning of the pandemic, it ebbed and flowed. You know, at first it was about our health, then it became racism was unveiled, and we were focusing on that. Those two pandemics and become 3 and 4 and 5 at the same time, colliding. So we are a network that even though we were 6 states, we actually came together at least 4 times a year for overnights and just, again, part of that convening and being community. So the Zoom, you know, being on Zoom changed that. But we were dealing, I think all of us personally and professionally, we're just trying to navigate what all that looks like. In the end, I think that we talk about even some of our, we would have had a summit. We were planning our annual summit for 2020 and really excited because we were just going to come back together and start solutionizing around what next when we talk about our food vision, 50% by 2060. So it was recognizing that in this uncertainty, there were things that were certain. We're certain that we were connected, we were committed, we were all trying to figure it out. So the patience and grace and understanding of all that has to go through. We certainly leaned on the Zoom, like everyone, whatever platform we were able to create, we were leaning on that. What I do want to say that for us, as we were going to come together for the summit, when we have, just like right now, the number of people that can come from wherever across the country to be engaged, we found that to be one of those, again, building our network, our Food Solutions Network, as a blessing, a benefit of one of those positives of what we were personally and professionally dealing with. So that was the positive side, or the resilient side of it, that we ended up with more people who had opportunity to engage, where travel might have been an issue, childcare might have been an issue, housing might have been an issue, but you can get on your computer and be engaged. And we created other ways, trying to, certainly our coffee chats and other ways to keep connected, and knowing that personal face-to-face is so important to us. It really, really is, for all of us, for our nurturing. Looking for ways that we can do that when people are comfortable and safe, and when it is the best time to do that. So that's kind of a long way, but yes, we navigated through and actually brought in opportunity for more interconnection by using the technology that we had available. Erin, how did it work for you?
Yeah, COVID, I mean, COVID disrupted everybody's lives, right? Obviously from an individual perspective, as well as from a professional perspective in terms of our networks. And I think, I've done a lot of work, including response to the earthquake in Haiti, but it was very way that it was like kind of coming into what was impacting other people. And so I think this just uniquely was impacting the entire world at the same time. So all of us were impacted, 100% of individuals. I would say from our perspective, there was definitely, from a COVID response perspective, trying to figure out kind of like, how much do we kind of look short-term versus continue on this like 5-year vision, and what does responsiveness need to look like? And one of the primary things that we did was work really closely with the Office of Emergency Management and Emergency Response within the state, and really develop pretty strong partnerships with them to kind of understand where their capacity was. And I think one unique consideration, or maybe not unique, is here in Colorado, our Office of Emergency Management is set up for, a wildfire or a flood, which happens in a single county or maybe 2, or worst case scenario crosses 3. And so the staff and a half that they had dedicated to emergency response was clearly not enough with COVID, when all of a sudden we had all of these issues across the state. So that was a big role that we ended up playing, just because we were poised to kind of be in that position, as well as we worked with a number of philanthropic organizations here in Colorado, to stand up an emergency hunger relief fund. So we provided small grants out to community partners all across the state, really trying to get to organizations who had community trust, who were working directly with communities, who may or may not have been working in the food space before, and who may or may not have had the resources to do the work that they were doing. So again, not large amounts of money. We ended up distributing about $6 million to over 600 grantees. So they were small grants, but really allowed, what our perspective on it was, we need these community organizations to be intact at the end of COVID too. And so really trying to both support organizations who were standing up or entering the food space, who had those trusted relationships in their communities, or organizations who had already been doing food, but weren't necessarily served through some of the federal funding streams that were flowing through the state. So really it was working on kind of gap filling to make sure that we had kind of a strong and robust community, a network of community partners. So that was probably the most significant kind of direct activity. But yeah, I think a couple of lessons for us, I think early on in the pandemic, there were a whole lot of things that happened really quickly, like egos were gone, right? Nobody knew anything, right? We were all of a sudden all in this place where we were learning together and trying to figure it out together. And I think that was a huge opportunity for trust building. And I think that continues to be, and just kind of how we navigate these changes together as a network has been a really powerful space, at least from my perspective, in terms of being able to build trust across partners.
If I can jump in here quickly, Erin, thank you. First of all, just want to acknowledge kudos to all the work that you did. I mean, it's really amazing to hear. You were right. Like at the beginning of the pandemic, we were like, what's happening? We have no idea. And there were two really important things that I think happened for us at the beginning of the pandemic. One is, as part of our informal network, we have a group of people with lived experience of hunger and poverty, and we started having regular meetings with them. And they were telling us there's no food in the supermarkets, there's no PPE anywhere. I mean, so the interesting thing is we work with national organizations, and our national organizations were saying, it's so great to get this firsthand information because it hasn't bubbled up yet through our network, right? Like the way they collect information about what's happening in communities. So we were dealing with sort of real-time information for people around the country, which was really helping us to focus. And then the next thing is we would have policy meetings every other month. We decided we needed to have a daily briefing just to focus on what's happening, who knows what. And we quickly coalesced around, we need to make sure that there's an appropriate nutrition response to whatever Congress does to combat COVID and the pandemic. And so we quickly coalesced around increasing SNAP 15%. And that was almost a year of advocacy, but we got it done. And it was really, for 6 months, we had daily briefings. I never thought that could happen. But afterwards, when we were able to stop and breathe and think, our members said to us, like, yes, like we knew you guys were the ones to convene these daily briefings because we already had the network. So the fact is we were able to build on what we had already built with our extensive network. So that was really important, I think, in terms of our ability to respond.
And if I could jump in really quickly as well, I think being a government employee who was really activated on the response while supporting a network and being on grant funding, I think it is fascinating, and I would echo the sentiments of really having the network set up so that we could act and we had those partners and we were connected to address on the ground what was happening and what was needed. But I think at the same time, and echoing Karen's comments about this dual pandemic, we really recognized that the structure of our network wasn't effective, to be completely honest. I think I was kind of smiling a bit to myself about the question of trust, because I think for me, really my goal is constantly, how do we ensure that there's shared leadership with community most impacted? And I'm constantly trying to strive for that and constantly failing, but really, really trying to make sure I'm at least trying to work towards it, because it is incredibly time consuming. And there's a huge amount of accountability that we don't really have really considered in government and other areas. And so I think we ended up going through a massive strategic planning process of our network to say, our current leadership structure doesn't even work right. How do we build out this accountability committee to really call out what we're doing as an entity and how we're really working with those folks? And I think just that has been really a theme that's come out of COVID in our network of how are we holding ourselves as organizations accountable, as government accountable, to really ensure that the network is more equitable and really has that level of shared leadership.
Wonderful, thank you. And I see, Wendy, you just posted something in the chat, which is great. And I want to click through and take a look at it. But it looks fascinating. And so if you have any questions as a participant, please put them in the chat and we'll start to collect. But we don't have a time yet. So Wendy, we'd love to hear a little bit more of what you're talking about in the chat here. We have time for you.
Sure. Hello, and please, just anyone jump in any time when their questions come in. I want to make sure people get their questions out there. So yeah, what I shared is a reflection piece that I noted in there that this is from my and my organization's perspective. So please note that when you read it. And I did that knowingly with the rest of the coalition. They knew I was doing this on my own. But we were a part of what was called the Colorado Farm and Food Systems Response Team. So in response to COVID, to be totally honest, we took a lot from what Erin was talking about, the blueprint did. They started mobilizing a little before we did, so we learned a lot from their path and their process. But so I did this piece and I wanted to share it just because I do think so many things that have already been touched upon, that the multiple pandemics, but just the challenges, the pitfalls, and the glories, I think, of when you try to rapidly mobilize in a time of crisis. And we asked this question of ourselves from the very, very beginning, so well over a year ago, and we never, I think, did an incredible job of addressing it. But how can you and how do you rapidly mobilize in a time of crisis in a truly equitable and inclusive way, right? When you're bringing people together and you're trying to solve some problem, and there's people in the core of your heart that you are trying to actually help and remove barriers for and make things better for. But how do you bring them to the table, right? How do you bring people to the table and move really quickly, which can be really damaging to relationships and to trust, and do that all at the same time. So the piece I shared is just sharing some of our reflections on sort of maybe what went well around that, what could have gone differently. And I think some big takeaways for me are just how, and I think we all know this, but how easy it is when you're moving very quickly in a time of crisis, that you call the people you know. And the people you know, so I, example, am part of a white-led statewide nonprofit organization. We work with a lot of other white-led statewide nonprofits, and really deeply examining the close networks that we have. I think this kind of blew that wide open. And when you're mobilizing quickly and you call who you know, there's even more severe risk that people are being left out that you're really trying to work with. So some things that we really reflected on were like things that I think we know, but sometimes get lost, or that taking that time. I mean, we've also trust. One of my coworkers who's a trainer in school food starts every training with progress moves at the speed of trust, right? So we're going to slow down the beginning of everything we do to make sure we know each other. But is it also starting with like shared value? I mean, we often talk about like decision making. Okay, how are we gonna make decisions and what roles do people fill? All that kind of stuff. But we don't often talk about like, but what are our shared values, right? Like, how are we actually gonna operate in this space together? How are we gonna communicate with each other? How do we honor different communication styles, especially in a time of crisis? So just digging a little bit deeper past the bylaws and the governance and the decision-making tools, and like, how do we be human together? And how do we start up initiate this process by even owning, like, I think you said this, Marissa, too, like, I'm going to fail, right? I wish I'd said that. I wish I could go back in time and say, please, how do we hold each other accountable? Because I am going to make a mistake. I'm going to mess up. I'm going to forget something. And so are you, and so are you. So how do we from the beginning build a space where we are human and honest and transparent, and yet hold each other accountable for that? So there's a lot more. And I know we don't have a whole lot of time left, but just wanted to share that piece. So I'm so happy to be here. I wish I knew a little bit more of the science around your network building a year and a half ago. Would have helped me a lot.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So it looks like we have just about 6 minutes left. So if there's any questions, please don't hesitate to put them in the Q&A. Otherwise, I can keep going with my questions. I have so many for a wonderful panel. So I'll keep an eye open on the chat, but please feel free to add it in. But I did want to ask, I mean, we've talked so much about that building relationship piece, which is so important. But then, of course, we're all coming together to make decisions and create things, mobilize action in order to address need. And so with that, we need information and tools and data to be able to do that. How did you deal with that during the pandemic? I mean, we were talking about very rapidly mobilizing and having some of that information bubble up from the ground. I mean, do any of you want to share a little bit about data or tools that you're using to be able to inform and create evidence-based decision-making, especially in sort of a rapid space?
I can talk a little bit about how I tried to create common tools that I thought would speed things up, like a Google documents site for shared documents, and created we spent a lot of time creating what I thought was a fabulous resource. Nobody ever used it. I mean, ultimately, people didn't have time to go to something else. So really, it kind of fell back on email. which is totally fine. We use it every day, right? But I thought, well, this is a time to create some new things that might work, but it was, I guess, not the time for people to change their routines and do something different or something new. If somebody else has a different experience, I'd love to hear about it.
I'm happy to chime in. I was just echoing Wendy's comment about considerations for funders and how long community building takes, and just the resources really needed, not just for staff and things like that, but to fund community. I mean, community members are really at the heart, the experts in a lot of this work and a huge part of the network. And I think central to these networks, often not in decision-making roles, but in who we're trying to serve. And I think it's so important. But in terms of data, I think we were in a bit of a fortunate position because we had started this prior to COVID. So at Jeffco, we've been doing a lot of GIS mapping in particular. And I'm happy to share our site. All of our data is open source and available for folks who are interested to learn more. But we really looked at different areas of root cause and how they relate to chronic disease and food access. So income, education, housing, employment, and then really looking at not just like what is the distance like USDA says to food, but what is actually the behavior? So where folks preference to go and how are we looking at those preferences for folks utilizing food benefits like SNAP and WIC? And also where is there high areas of unhealthy foods like fast food versus a grocery store? And I think that data was instrumental to figuring out, okay, these are communities that have these issues, but then there was a level of qualitative data where you need to go into communities and learn about, okay, like let's ground truth, is this really happening here? I think the next layer of that is really looking at, we've been collecting this data now, it'll be 9 years, and we're looking at over time, is that consistent? Are these communities still the same communities that are experiencing these trends? The other piece of that is really in terms of structural racism. And so we're looking at historical data around plots that discriminated against folks. And are those communities the same communities that are really being impacted by these same food access issues or not? So I think there's a lot to be done around data. We're constantly looking at new data. I think sharing data amongst organizations is vital. But I think just being able to start to collect it and have those longer term trends are really valuable to looking at future incidents or God forbid pandemics. But
thank you. So we just have 1 minute left. So I noticed something in the chat come up about the contents of all the amazing resources that are being shared by our panelists and by others. Thank you. We will absolutely collect all these and send them out with the slides so that you have access to them. So thank you for sharing all of those. One that had just been posted by Karen was a tool for building a culture of belonging and addressing racism in our food system. And so I wanted to give her just a minute to be able to talk about that because that is incredible. But I want to wrap up also by saying thank you so much to our panelists and to everyone for joining. And so with that, Karen, will you be able to wrap us up today?
Really quickly, in terms of that, thank you so much, Robin. When we're talking about building our trust and our shared values, that was really center for us at Food Solutions. If we're going to transform it, we needed to transform ourselves. We needed to collectively and individually take a look at what all this means around us. So we made a non-negotiable commitment to racial equity as a core value, recognizing, as Marissa said, historical food in US was based on racism. It was based on taking, it was based on othering. And when we go back to our indigenous peoples. And so recognizing where we were, where we came from, and how many of the same practices and ways of thinking and beliefs are that's threaded in lots of our federal policies, unless we come in with different mindsets and heart sets to shift that. So the challenge is something that, as I dropped in the chat, as a way for you and your organization, whether small, large, family, actually to dig in, and there are resources there. We do it every April for 21 days because that's habit building. We believe that, but we look at 365 days. It's not just then, but it's all year long. And we're looking at it, and we provide this platform of online. You get a prompt and you get information and you get thought questions, and you can use that tool all year long. You can decide next month you want to do it, bring it into your department, into your organization, into your network, and spend time in that. But it really has always been a way for us to begin to build. You mentioned earlier, Wendy, about accountability, being accountable accomplices. So that in this way, I think of accomplices as those people that will step in front of me on behalf of me. They will either side to steady me, behind me to push me forward. And so, and I also go even further, say they'll lay their lives down for this, for us creating and holding on this space that we all believe, we all own, we all are enough to be able to have what we need to be prosperous, to be vibrant, to be healthy, and to be whole. And so I invite you to look at that, click on that. There are many resources for you to do individual exploration, individual transformation, as well as finding what tools you can use for your organization. Because again, everyone here is thinking about networks, but networks to what end? Why are we networking? We're networking to build. We're networking to transform. We're networking to create something different. And so sometimes it starts with us becoming something different to be able to contribute to that difference. So I invite you on behalf of Food Solutions New England to step into the challenge and join 9,000 other people that were actively engaged this last year, and over 42 countries and all of 9 provinces in Canada. But again, all looking to see a different way that we can transform, we can feed, we can lift up our community, because we are they and they are we. We're not separate. And the more we understand, the more we lift up, we all lift up, that we all gain, we all prosper when we do that. We will be a healthier, happier, wholer, and more prosperous community across the country. So I invite you into the challenge, and so grateful that we are taking time to talk about the power of networks, because we're building network right now. Minerva, Wendy, Erin, Marissa, we're building it. We're building it. Thank you so much, Robin.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Marissa, Wendy, Erin, Minerva. Thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate you. I would just find you incredible and inspiring. So thank you for all of your work and for your time today. Thank you, everyone, for joining. We'll be sure to send out the resources, and we can continue to add if there's any others that anybody wants to pop into the chat to share. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.